I'd like to call to order the Planning and Zoning Commission of July 20th, 23. Please rise, if you would, for the invocation and the pledge. Dear Lord, as we stand here today to take on the business of the city of Leesburg, let the decisions we make be pleasing in your sight. We pray this in thy most holy name. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. Fellow commissioners, before you, you've got the minutes from the meeting of June 22nd. Are there any additions, corrections, or amendments to those minutes? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to accept as submitted.
I'll make, if you.
I motion to approve the minutes.
I have a motion. Do I hear a second?
Second.
I have a second. All in favor signify by saying aye and raise your right hand.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. As you know, Chairman Senate is not here today. He had to go pressing engagement over in Daytona Beach. And here I am back in the chair again. But we'll work on that too. Dan, if you would, tell us how we do business.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to welcome everyone to the July 2023 City of Leesburg Planning and Commission. My name is Dan Miller, Planning and Zoning Director for the City of Leesburg. With me today, Candy Harper, Senior Planner, Diane Yeckel, Senior Planner, and Christine Rock, also Senior Planner. And then that's it for today. Our planners are out for today. There is a meeting agenda on the table by the exit door if you don't have one. If you'd like to speak on a case that's being presented today, you can sign the speaker's registry and turn it in to Sabrina, who's sitting on my left. The meeting is conducted under the following process. The chairman will announce the case. The staff will read exhibits, including maps, photos, and text into the record, and then present this on the two screens. Staff will then read a recommendation into the record. The applicant will have an opportunity to speak about the request. The chairman will allow time for public comments, and the applicant will have an opportunity for rebuttal. The chairman closes the case to the public. The commission discusses the case, and then a vote is taken. The Planning Commission is an appointed board appointed by the City Commission. They are charged with two major responsibilities. The first is to make final decisions on cases such as variances and conditional uses. The second is to make recommendations on issues to be heard by the City Commission. There's one case on today's agenda, smallest agenda in a while. And it's a zoning case, which is a recommendation. That recommendation will then be forwarded to the City Commission for their consideration with two readings. We'd like everyone to note the tentative dates on the agenda. The case on today's agenda will be heard, I believe it was August 14 and August 28 for the zoning. And these dates are subject to being changed, so we ask everyone who's interested to please contact the Planning and Zoning Office if you have any concerns about the dates. Finally, on behalf of the planning staff and Leesburg Planning Commission, we thank you for your participation in today's public hearing process. Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Dan. I'll introduce public hearing case SPUD 23314, Good News Church Small Planned Unit Development. Oh, is anybody sworn in? Who's going to speak? Stand. If you want to speak today.
Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give us the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Can I get an I do out of you, Sandy? Or Candy?
Yes, sir, I do.
Okay. Carry on.
Thank you, sir. Case number one today on today's agenda, this is SPUD 23-312, Good News Church, Small Plan Unit Development. By background, this is a proposal to amend the existing SPUD zoning for the Good News Church to add property consisting of the lot immediately to the south, which is currently zoned R3 high-density residential. The northern part of this property is currently zoned SPUD. The bottom part, southern part, is zoned R3. If approved through the process, these properties will both be zoned SPUD. Consists of approximately 11.3 acres. The location is south of State Road 44 on the east side of Executive Boulevard. The request is to add a use for police, public safety, and canine training. This would remove, as I said earlier, the R3 high-density residential, which sits in an industrial area right now, which you'll see on the maps in a moment, and replace it with the SPUD zoning. The City of Leesburg Police Department would like to use the site for training purposes, which, as they have explained to us, will include canine training. Candy Harper, Senior Planner, will present the maps and photo exhibits, including the aerial zoning, future land use, surrounding land use, wetlands, flood zones, and CRA maps.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. On the screen before you is the aerial showing the location of the property, which lies east of Executive, and you can't see it on the map, but it's south of State Road 44. And the zoning of the first parcel is SPUD, and the parcel to the south is R3, and you can see it's surrounded by industrial, another small planned unit development, and one of our commercial industrial planned zonings. Lake County zoning consists of agriculture, R6, light industrial, and heavy industrial. And the proposed zoning is to extend the small planned unit development to incorporate both lots. The future land use in the city of Leesburg is industrial across both properties. Lake County future land use is regional office, rural, and industrial. Surrounding land uses, as you might imagine, are light manufacturing, warehousing, service shops, and vacant industrial, light manufacturing, improved pasture land, and light manufacturing with some warehousing. There will be some flood zone considerations to take into account on the site. And of course, they're going to have to deal with the wetlands if they get into too much of that. I don't imagine there's going to be an issue with this particular use. And it is in Commission District 2. So the picture on the top is a close-up of the sign directly across Executive Boulevard. Picture on the bottom is looking north along Executive Boulevard. Property, or the picture on the top is looking east into the property from Executive. Picture on the bottom is looking south along the property. You can see this is all open, mostly undeveloped land out there. And this picture is looking west across Executive Boulevard from the site. And that's all I have, Mr. Miller.
Thank you, Candy. Under the departmental review summary, the project was sent out to all the city departments. We received no comments back from them in regard to the proposed use. Under State of Florida and City of Leesburg notice requirements, the project was sent out to the surrounding property owners. Again, no comments or responses received. Basically, we have 11.3 plus or minus acres total. No negative impacts are anticipated. The use is pretty straightforward and simple. The site will be used for public safety and canine training. I'd like to go ahead and read the recommendation into the record. For the petitioner Good News Church, case number SPUD 23-314, Planning and Zoning Division recommends approval of the request for the following reasons. One, the proposed request is compatible with the current surrounding zoning districts, including City of Leesburg M1 Industrial, Lake County A Agriculture, and Heavy Industrial, which is HM. Two, the proposed request is compatible with the current future land use designation of industrial and the current surrounding future land use designations, including City of Leesburg Industrial and Lake County Regional Office. 3, the proposed request will allow for the existing use of a worship center to continue while permitting the city's police department a suitable site for their police dog training. 4, the proposed request does not appear to create a detriment to surrounding properties based on the location and proximity to compatible development. Finally, the action requested is to vote to approve staff's recommendation to rezone the subject property from SPUD small planned unit development and R3, which is high-density residential, to SPUD small planned unit development and forward to the City Commission for their consideration. The next page in your packet shows the changes that were made to the existing small planned unit development. They're in underline. We added the uses for worship center. We added public-private partnership uses, including police canine training. We changed the acreage, and then we have under land uses 3A2, the public-private partnership and accessory uses, which include police and canine, temporary accessory structures, permanent accessory structures, etc. We removed under development standards the wildlife archaeological management plan because there's nothing out there, no need for this. And we removed the requirement for a traffic transportation study because this use would be well under the 100 trips per day in the peak hour. So there's no need for that. Beyond that, those were the changes. We do have Captain Scott Mack from the Leesburg Police Department to answer any questions on the police side, and representing the case, Mr. Greg Beliveau from the Land Planning Group of Mount Dora. Mr. Chairman, staff is recommending approval.
Very good. I have a question. And anybody can answer it. I know you're training dogs. Do you take children?
We try not to.
I have some grandchildren I could send your way. But does the commission have any questions of the applicant?
I have a question.
Please.
In regards to the dogs, what is, just for the public to know, what's involved on a site where dogs are being trained?
So we've entered into an
Please
agreement.
introduce yourself to the...
I'm sorry. My name is Captain Scott Mack. I am with the Leesburg Police Department. I'm the Patrol Division Commander, and among my responsibilities, I oversee the Leesburg Police Department's K-9 program. We've entered into an agreement with Good News Church, and they've been gracious enough to allow us to utilize a portion of this property, which previously had been a softball, baseball, football field back in the day when it was the Boys and Girls Club. And so we have a nice open field there. The nice part about that is it's away from any residential properties, and any noise or anything that may occur as a result of any training that we're doing would not affect anybody residentially. The majority of the training that our canines do is in the evenings and at night for a multitude of reasons. Scheduling is the primary reason, but also it's a little cooler at night and it's a little easier on the dogs and the trainers. What we intend to do is we're going to be fencing off a training field within that property that will be 6-foot chain link fencing that would contain the dogs inside of that fencing during any training. And it will be anything from tracking, where they are doing practice as far as trying to track a missing person or a suspect using scent articles, to doing drug training and trying to locate narcotics type substances, to general obedience training, and including apprehension training or their bite work.
Thank you.
Outstanding. Any other questions of the applicant?
Well, I'm Greg Beliveau with Good News Church and LPG, and the reason we're happy they're coming is that we've had a problem down there, and I think it's partially because of our location. When we bought this from the Boys and Girls Club, as you can see, we're kind of tucked in, and we've had joyriders down there. We've found donuts being driven in our parking lot. We found syringes. We found all kinds of interesting items back in that neck of the woods, and we've our police department has responded, but obviously by the time they get there, most of this activity has been gone, and we've had to repair our property because of these activities. And when they offered to do this activity and trading, we not only were overjoyed, and we said, yes, please do it, and we're not going to charge you a dime. Get out here and do whatever you have to do. And we thought it was actually a okie dokie thing to do because we were already a civic, institutional type use. So we asked them, sure, come on out here. Then code enforcement showed up. And
Oh, darn, somebody
yes,
doing the job.
who works for them. So said, no, you can't do this. So we then proceeded to go through this process. And this property was always a property owned by both the Boys and Girls Club. They own both tracks. And when we first went out there, we bought the north half and changed it from the Boys and Girls Club to Good News Church a little over 10 years ago. And then the south half, we had an option on the south half. And that portion became available about 4 or 5 years ago, and we exercised that option. And it just sat there. I mean, it's got the ball field, like I stated, the softball, baseball fields fenced off. And we basically use it for fun stuff. We want to do things and all that kind of thing. And so when this exercise came up to go through the SPUD process, it was advantageous to incorporate it into the SPUD and have it as one document and have it as all one piece of property under this designation. So, it's all owned free and clear. We have no mortgage. So if anybody's looking for, we'd like to get out of here and move to a new higher and easier location to find. So if you're looking, as another church wants to buy it for like $2 million cash, we're looking for a buyer, and we'll be glad to vacate.
Maybe they could have a dog church.
Yeah, thanks. So thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Bellevue. Okay, does anybody have any more questions or any discussion amongst the commission?
Any
Hearing none. Yeah.
public comment?
Anybody here to talk on it? Thank you. If not, I'll entertain a motion.
Well, I'd like to make a motion to approve small planning unit development 233-4.
I have a motion to approve. Do I have a second?
I second the motion.
I got a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion's carried.
Yes.
Very good. Boy, that was a tough agenda. I think the staff has some educational information for us today. So, Dan?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We've recently been talking to some of the Planning Commission members who are receiving communications from people outside in the public. And we wanted to bring up the subject of what's known as ex parte communication. Basically, what we're looking for is to come to a general consensus. It's not a vote or anything, just a general discussion and educational time to talk about when you're talking to people outside of this area. It basically falls into the topics of ex parte communication and quasi-judicial meetings and proceedings. Just as a quick background, then I'm going to turn it over to Grant, our city attorney, but the doctrine of ex parte communications is basically written or oral communication between a decision maker and an interested person concerning any issue in a formal proceeding other than a procedural matter that does not occur in a public forum. In other words, talking to someone about a case outside of this room with everyone present. A quasi-judicial is simply means like a court. And it's a proceeding conducted by an administrative or executive official or organization, which what this is, an administrative organization that's similar to a court proceeding. And so this body makes decisions Sometimes recommendations and sometimes decisions. Today, there was a recommendation. If it had been a conditional use permit, it would have been a decision. But it's still in a court-like setting where there's testimony and swearing in and all this. So what we wanted to do, the staff's goal is to get a consensus on how the commission feels about ex parte communication. I'm saying that right, I hope. But in the past, the previous city attorney, Mr. Morrison, had basically advised against it. And Grant will fill us in, but my understanding is under the law, if you talk to someone about a zoning case, whether it's another member of the commission, an applicant, or a member of the public, you are supposed to bring it up at this meeting and say, I talked to John Doe or Jane Doe or whoever about the case, to put it on the record that you had a conversation. Staff would prefer that we continue what we've been doing over the years, in that the commission not speak to anyone about the cases. Let the elected city representatives, the city commission, do that. It's the presumption of doing something wrong. It's the look. Not that you would do anything wrong, but if someone comes up to you at a restaurant, man, I hear you're having a zoning case this week, and I really hate it, and he tries to involve you in a conversation, the best thing to do is say, in staff's opinion, the best thing to do is to say, I can only speak about it in the public hearing setting, because you'll then have to legally state at that meeting that I did have a conversation with John Doe, and then that places for the general public the suspicion that something went on, even if it didn't, which I don't believe it would. But it's the look, it's the optics, and we need to remain above board and clear. Yes, it can take time to get things done and make decisions, but we have to be above board, clear, and honest in all our communications. And sometimes these things take time. So I would like to turn it over to our city attorney, Mr. Grant Watson.
Yeah, thank you, Dan. And Dan gave a really good sort of summary there about the exact issue. Again, sort of recapping, ex parte communications would be those communications, generally one-sided communications, that take place with a decision maker outside of the actual hearing itself about an issue that is pending before those decision makers. Many of, your role as the Planning and Zoning Commission, your primary function is to make decisions about real property within the city limits of Leesburg. Many of the hearings that you have, like Dan was just saying, variances, rezonings, special exceptions, conditional uses, these are heard under quasi-judicial proceedings. So they're similar to a courtroom, not exactly like a courtroom. You don't follow the same strict rules of evidence or courtroom procedures, but you still have due process considerations that are in play, because what you're doing in many ways is similar to what a court does, in that you listen to facts that are, you listen to evidence, you make factual determinations about the evidence, and then you apply, whether it's the comprehensive plan, city code, land development regulations, to that set of facts and render a decision. And that decision affects the rights of property owners, residents, and other folks. So that's sort of why you have these same considerations. So again, although the procedures are a little bit different than a courtroom, a lot of the policy considerations are the same because of the impact of the decisions that you make. So ex parte communications. This is an issue that's in play in the judicial and quasi-judicial hearings. And a while ago, there was some case law in the state that determined that ex parte communications, either in the judicial context or the quasi-judicial context, give rise to a presumption of prejudice in the decision. So once this presumption of prejudice has arisen, it's very difficult to overcome that presumption. And if you're not able to overcome the presumption, then everything goes back to square one. Everything's undone, new hearing, everything starts fresh. So certainly not the type of thing you want to have happen is sort of defend against this presumption of prejudice that might arise in the context of ex parte communications. So in 1995, what the state did was passed a statute that said, okay, well, we understand sort of the reality of these types of bodies. And we understand there may be circumstances where somebody is trying to reach out to talk about issues that are pending. So they created a statute that said, that basically eliminated the presumption of prejudice as long as certain procedures are adopted and followed. So that's where our statute comes into play. So the statute, and I think there was a copy in our agenda package that everybody had, but the statute kind of goes into three different types of ex parte communication scenarios. So the first one was basically any type of ex parte communication, and it requires disclosure of the subject of the ex parte communication and identity of the person, group, or entity with whom the communication took place, and making that part of the record before a final decision. So that's basically any type of ex parte communication. This is the procedure. The next is for written communications. It says that a commissioner could read a written communication, but the written communication needs to be made part of the record before the decision's made. The third would be site visits, investigations, or if you perhaps went to speak to an engineer or someone that might be considered an expert to sort of gather information for your own benefit before the hearing. And again, that's something that you would need to disclose and have that made part of the record before the final decision's made, disclose the fact of the investigation or site visit that took place. So these are the three areas where the statute addresses and says, if you do this under these scenarios, then that would not give rise to this presumption of prejudice. Now, each of these would have to be, and we kind of touched on this, each of these would have to be disclosed before or during the public meeting where the matter's voted on, so that anybody who has a contrary position or perspective to the ex parte communication would have an opportunity to challenge that or rebut that communication that took place. Now, one of the keys in the statute is that it talks about if adopted by a county or municipal ordinance or resolution. Now, one thing that I have not seen since this issue was brought to my attention was I do not see an ordinance or resolution that the city's passed, and you know, I haven't poured through everything necessarily, but I'm not aware of anything the city's passed to adopt these statutory procedures that the state had passed. So with not knowing that an ordinance has been passed to adopt these procedures, then it's certainly questionable whether or not you could take advantage of the statute that removes the presumption of prejudice if there's not an ordinance adopting the procedures. So I think from that standpoint, I would caution everybody that engaging in ex parte communications without an ordinance approving and adopting these statutory standards is probably something that you should avoid. Now, that said, if there were a situation where the city were to pass an ordinance or resolution, or if we find one that has adopted these procedures, then, that's basically the Bible as far as what you need to do if you're going to choose to engage in that. Now, there's nothing, even if the procedures were adopted, there's nothing that would per se require any of you to participate in ex parte communications. But if you choose to, then this is the roadmap that you would need to follow in participating and disclosing those procedures. outside of that, another issue that Dan had touched on was public perception, which I think is something for consideration. Considering that you would be disclosing sort of the nature of the communication, what happened, and then rendering a decision on that very item, there could be a perception from those present at the meeting that, maybe decisions were made outside of the hearing context. And so I think that's another concern, although the statute, again, has sort of eliminated the legal presumption, there's still the perception from the public and how you want to proceed. So I think kind of as we sit here, my general recommendation would be not to do it because I'm not aware of an ordinance or resolution that currently exists that has adopted the structure to remove that presumption of prejudice. If one is adopted, again, perhaps then would be a better time to maybe look at sort of a board-wide policy or consensus as to what everybody wants to do. I think from staff's perspective, they just want to know who would perhaps participate in those types of discussions and who would not. So if they're fielding inquiries from members of the public, they would know sort of offhand, no, there's not going to be a meeting, or maybe there would be a meeting. But, that's sort of generally the recap on the ex parte communication issue. If anybody has any questions, I'm happy to talk about those now. Certainly anybody can give me a call at my office anytime you have any questions that come up about this issue or any other issues. I'm always, if I'm not available right that second, I'm always available to you and happy to discuss any issues or questions that you have. Just sort of as an aside, you all would discuss these issues certainly not with each other outside of the hearing context either. That's a different issue, the Sunshine Law. Right. But really the general policy on having the discussions, receiving the evidence, considering the evidence in the public hearing forum is probably the best place to do it. Certainly eliminates the checklist of disclosures and considerations that you have to go through. And I think just from a public perception standpoint, it probably is a more sound position to go with as well, just for public confidence. So like I said, I'm happy to field any questions or anything like that. And if you think of something after today and you want to talk about it, give me a shout, shoot me an email. I'll be happy to talk to you about it.
Mr. Chairman, from staff's perspective, the public perception is extremely important because there are times when you have someone working in the government who's like paddling like a duck underneath the water, so to speak, trying to deal with an issue. But the perception is that nothing is being done, when that's not correct, but it takes time to get these things done. And what we don't want to have happen is for the public to perceive that there have been workings behind the scene, because there's not. And the appearance of that, it's not true, but if the appearance of that shows up, how do you get it? How do you correct it? How do you prove it? That I didn't have a conversation with someone at Outback or somewhere, that I didn't talk to anyone.
Right.
And that's our concern, is that it's simpler for the commission, it's simpler for staff, and it's better for the public to not have to worry about the integrity of any staff, any commission members. And that's staff's preferred position. The commission has the right to do what they want to do, I suppose.
Yeah, and I think that's a very good recap. And to kind of tie this back to what Fred Morrison had said, I suspect that ultimately his position was founded on the fact that there's not an ordinance or resolution that adopts the state statutory procedures, hence the recommendation or advice to not engage in those types of discussions.
Well, believe me, this is wonderful advice to get, because you can get in a lot of trouble. I got a phone call this week about an issue that's coming down the pike. hey, we'd like for you to meet with the developer, and we'd like for you to meet with, us and talk about what we want to do. Well, boy, you can see what the potential right there of getting in trouble. And after being on the city commission, planning and zoning, board of adjustments, and all these, I've learned over the years, no, don't step into that trap. Because I says, is somebody going to be handing out $100 bills at that meeting? That's what the public could be thinking. And my response to that person was that I'd be happy to educate myself on what they want to do, and whatever was discussed, we would discuss at the planning and zoning meeting. And that just covers all those bases of getting yourself in trouble or getting fingers pointing at you. Oh, no, he did this. He's been in collusion with so-and-so. So that and discussion amongst ourselves outside of this room, we enter into the Sunshine Law. And you can ask us, commissioner up in the Villages, what happened to him. Two of them, yeah. The governor stepped in and says, you're out of here. So thank you for educating us and reminding us all, and those that didn't understand this, please take it to heart. It's very meaningful. And because people want to come talk to you, you're a commissioner, and this is what I want. And you got to be careful.
We would like to bring forth topics like this for discussion from time to time as the schedule, since we only had one case, and goodness, it's been so long since we've had only one case, I can't even remember. But we did want to take this opportunity.
Yeah, and I think jumping in, something that we've talked about with Tim was getting into Sunshine a little bit and public records and going over those issues to make sure everybody's comfortable with that as well. I mean, not to jump into that today, I've got a Sunshine manual this thick sitting on my, so it's hard to cover everything really in one thing. There's a couple of little general principles I think you can keep in mind that we can kind of touch on that'll help you stay out of trouble. If you feel like you're straying into something that's in the gray area, again, I invite you to give me a call at any point. I'll be happy to talk to all of you.
Now, did you mention something about even if you go look at a site, that needs to be mentioned?
Yes, sir. Site visits and investigations broadly are items that are addressed as ex parte communications.
Even if no other party is involved?
Right.
That's right.
So if you just want to ride by?
That's
Look
right.
at this by yourself.
Right, and you wouldn't do it together because then you'd have the sunshine law.
I'm just
So if you were
looking at the
driving
site.
by yourself to
See, that's what I used to
investigate a
always
site.
advise.
I mean, if you drive by every day going home, I think that's different
No.
than making a special trip over there to kind of gather information
Right.
for you to help help you make a decision when that hearing comes to you.
And
That's
staff,
a problem.
staff does.
Well, again, it's a problem in the context of the statute considers that to be something within the purview of ex parte communications. And absent an ordinance or code provision that has adopted these disclosure procedures, then it's something that could be, not presume, it couldn't take advantage of that presumption potentially because of the lack of the ordinance. Or
Yeah,
resolution.
because I went by a site before, to be honest about it,
Yeah.
prior to a meeting, just to get a better understanding of.
Yeah. I think that's a fuzzier area.
It is. It is. I mean, again, I think driving by a site and visiting the site and investigating the site are different issues.
Yeah.
People travel around. We have a fundamental right to travel, right? People travel around. You see what you see, and you may drive by properties that are on your route to and from work every day. I mean, I don't think you need to disclose shows everything like that.
Right.
But if you're sitting there and you've marked on your calendar, right, today I'm going to ABC Street because I'm going to check that out because I know I've got this hearing coming up next week and I want to see what's going on there, then yeah, under those circumstances, it would be something.
I used to always advise when I was on planning and zoning before to educate yourself on what we're looking at. But when you drive by or you look at it, you don't check with the neighbors or talk to the neighbors about what's going on or get their opinion about what's going on. That's when you start getting in trouble. But a drive-by, I've never found that to be getting in trouble whatsoever.
Staff, and I wanted to say
Correct me
this.
if I'm wrong there, but
I wanted,
Yeah, I mean, sort of like we were saying. I mean, I think they don't give you definitions in the statutes like many times, but I think the term investigation implies a little bit more than just right. Site visit again is going there to really collect factual information about the site so that you can use this factual information that you've collected outside of the hearing to render a decision.
Right.
Right. That's where the issues come into play, where you're trying to sort of figure out the facts outside of the hearing context. If you're trying to learn what are variances, how are variances decided, or how are conditional use permits sort of globally looked at, from a 30,000-foot view, because I want to understand what issues I need to look at and make decisions on. What are the factors for variances, What is the hardship that we need to learn? I mean, these are different, right? These are just more general educational type things about the issues that are before you. When you're getting into the fact-specific issues for each case and discovering these factual issues sort of on your own and trying to come to decisions about those and applying the code, the comp plan, that's where you would be more in the land of investigating and run more afoul of this type of issue. But, driving by, waving, taking a look while you're, driving by, I don't think that rises to the level of investigations and site
that was the
visits.
concern that staff wanted to bring up was we want to encourage going by every site.
Good.
I mean, that's always what we've wanted because you, from your perspective, may see something that we've totally missed. No, I hope not, but it can happen. And we want you to be educated about it. But as Grant was saying, a drive-by is different from the stop and talk to the neighbors.
Yeah.
And so, anyway, thank you.
Good. If I'm not familiar with the piece of property, sometimes I'll want to go drive by to see what's around it, what's there, and I always thought that was beneficial to making a decision. So I never talked to anybody about that.
I don't talk to anybody.
And the chain of conversation that Ted mentioned, I was on that same chain of conversation about meeting with someone. And that's when I called you and then I called Grant. So that was very helpful too.
Yeah.
I backed out of that deal pretty quick.
Just be careful. That's all. Don't put yourself in a compromising position because the fact that we're commissioners on the Planning and Zoning Commission, they'll call his office and want a list of all the commissioners and phone numbers and start calling everybody. And don't do that.
We always say no because of the ex parte.
You don't give the phone numbers out?
No.
If somebody were to call you?
No.
Okay.
No, they can find us on their own.
I think I told her to call you to get. She was
We're not
asking,
elected officials.
asking the
She
name,
don't
phone
talk
number
to me.
for a couple of the commissioners. So you have to call
It's
Dad about that.
amazing.
No, we're not elected, thank
People
goodness.
think we are.
All right, any more questions? Any more concerns on that?
Thank you for that.
No, sir.
That's good.
Thank you.
Grant, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Dan, thank you. One other item I want to bring up, and I've been trying to get rid of this thing, okay? And Tim, is busy today, and I didn't mind stepping up. But I am also wanting to pass the gavel on vice chairman. I don't want to be in charge of vice anymore. But as being a co-chairman of this committee, and I mentioned to Commissioner Sanders if he would be interested in taking that second chair. He said he would be. Now, is there anyone else on this commission that would like to have their name thrown into the hat to be vice chairman, other than Nathan? Do I hear any other nominations? Hearing no other nominations, let's all vote unanimously to accept Nathan as our vice chairman.
Do we need to make a motion on that?
I just did.
Oh,
Second- I second the motion.
What else on it?
Okay.
All in favor, say aye.
Thank you, Nathan.
Passes. Nathan,
Thank
congratulations.
goodness. Thank goodness.
Thank God you finally got rid of me.
Thank you, sir.
I just moved in there fair and square. I thought there was,
Hit him on the head.
when he was saying it, I thought there was something
Hey,
better
Nathan,
than
first
the
job is hit him on the head with that gavel.
No, you're now vice chairman, and whatever you got to say.
But I just appreciate the opportunity, and thank you for thinking enough of me that I could do the job. So, you know, I'm here to learn, and it's been a learning experience to this point. It really has. An interesting experience.
You'll do a great job.
Yes, sir. I appreciate it.
All right. So are we going to stand adjourned, or what are you going to do?
Mr. Chairman, I wanted to take a quick second and
Okay.
say a big thank you to my staff for all the hard work they did while I was out. And as you know, I was out for almost 3 weeks with some major surgery, so just now coming back.
Nice suntan.
Glad you're feeling better.
I wish. I can't pick up anything more than 10 pounds until September, so it's been fun. But I want to say my staff did such a wonderful job, and I'm really proud of them. So thank you.
Dan, I like to.
Awesome party you guys threw at.
Yeah, Dan, I wanted to mention to you, I was checking them there every day, and they did come into work at 9 o'clock. I can't tell you when they checked out, though. They told me not to tell. And but the main thing is you're back, and the girls have got to go back to work now. And I'm sure glad they caught your issues when they did, and you're feeling better and are going to get better.
Sir, thank you very much.
Good to see you here.
Hey, Commissioner, good to see you here again. Good to know you care.
Well, if there are no more questions or concern, I entertain a motion to adjourn the meeting.
All right, hit it.
Do I need to get a motion?
There you go. No,
You can just say, got a motion?
Meeting adjourned.